All right. Thanks for tuning into the Limitless Learning Podcast, where we talk all things the future of learning. And today I'm really thrilled to have our guest, James Kelly. He's the founder of a project called Learnyx, which has a couple different learning tools. It's really pushing forward a more personalized learning experience for students and helping up some key metrics and literacy and just engagement. And it's a really exciting project overall. So how are you doing today, James?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Dominic. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things I want to start out talking about is you're a teacher, correct?
Yes.
So I
Yes.
want to hear like a moment in your teaching career where that inspired you to start these projects.
Yeah. So I'm happy to talk about that. So I was a teacher. I taught here in Brownsville in Brooklyn, New York. At the time when I was teaching, I'm not sure if those numbers still hold, but it was the most impoverished area in Brooklyn. So there were a lot of gaps there, literacy
Mhm.
gaps, behavior gaps, like issues outside of the classroom that you could only do so much with as a teacher with 45 minutes a day with 30 kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Taught science. So I actually did my student teaching there. I had a great mentor teacher who coached me through everything and managed to actually get me hired, which was fantastic. And I started out teaching sixth grade science and fifth grade special education, seventh grade special education, and eighth grade special education within
Yeah.
science classrooms. During my first really like full year of teaching as a not as a student teacher, as a full teacher, and COVID hit in the middle
Yeah.
and actually sort of saved me from the workload because at that point I'd been teaching two grades. I had been switched off from special education to take over some classes that has a little bit some behavior issues. And so I was teaching both fifth grade and sixth grade at the time. And so the workload had gotten really tough. COVID came, everything went digital. I started exploring digital solutions. I started exploring, Excel, the types of things that you can do when, you spend your entire day in front of a computer.
Yeah, exactly.
Then halfway through COVID, or actually the next COVID year, I think it was 2021, my school decided that they wanted to implement a accelerated biology course, basically a high school biology in the eighth grade. They asked me to take over since I had my certification in biology education,
Right.
and they gave me a great co-teacher who's actually still working with me on one of these on my project on Litson right now. And we basically got to the business of teaching a bunch of like 13 and 14-year-olds like biology.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty big difference between fifth grade and sixth grade science and like Regents biology, because you go from something that's really like, exploratory experiments, lots of fun, um,
Yeah.
lots of interesting topics, a wide variety of topics, to like these really in-depth and dense, like
Yeah.
specific topics with texts. And,
Exactly.
I always say like biology is a class where you teach like the 10-letter word mitochondria in like the first week,
Yeah.
and things only get tougher from there. That change, that switch from like fifth and sixth grade to eighth grade is when I really started to see, sorry, to biology, eighth grade biology is when I really started to see how big of an issue literacy was. It was
Hmm.
almost like this insurmountable obstacle for me in
Yeah.
that biology class, because no matter how much I drilled them on the content, no matter how well we understood the experiments, no matter how much no matter how many vocabulary words I taught them, no matter how well I explained the natural phenomena,
Right.
the final exam is, 30 to 40 questions, each with a decently long chunk of text that you have to decipher and have the stamina to, one, like understand what they're saying, one, read it, right? Process it, understand what they're saying, and then recall
Yeah.
the topics that
Yeah.
I taught. And that was, again, really eye-opening to me. And so I ended up like, when basically I had left my school and was exploring a couple of different basically services. And when ChatGPT came out and the AI revolution occurred, I realized that it was just an incredible opportunity to build personalized learning literacy tools, whether that is based off of content, based off of difficulty, standards aligned, and now we're doing all three.
Incredible. Yeah. So you saw this huge gap in literacy. You saw the technology and you were able to bridge those two together and kind
Exactly.
of, yeah, that's brilliant. So I'm curious how you went about theming these two different projects. We have Lit Zone, which is more sports oriented, and then we have Game Stories, which is more fantasy. And I'm curious, like, was there something in your teaching experience that made you say, okay, I want to target this area and I want to target so that we get everyone engaged and involved?
Well, those are actually our second and third solution. We had a first solution before that.
Okay.
And the
Yeah.
first solution was really around differentiation of educational, of in classroom content. So leveling up a text so that students
Cool.
who are at maybe your second grade reading level can access it. And the students who are at 10th grade reading level are still challenged. I did that with a previous co-founder. My previous co-founder left to work in a different industry. And between the time when I had, when the previous co-founder left and I recruited my new co-founder who I'm currently working with, we had been lapped by by the bigger competitors in the ed tech space and AI space. So, like Diffit and Magic School had basically just like eaten our lunch and thrown out the scraps, I would say.
Right. Yeah.
And so by the time we had gotten the product that was like live and ready to go, it just wasn't like particularly viable. And so
Right.
we had to one, like realize, hey, like we were solving we were trying to solve a bunch of different problems. We were trying to make a differentiation tool for teachers and then a reading engagement tool for kids. And so we decided like, let's pick a problem. Let's find out what it is, and then let's commit to it. And that's how Game Stories was born, actually. And the problem we
Yeah.
chose was reading engagement. Is that,
Hmm.
one thing that I like to talk about is like I grew up playing Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and
Yeah.
these types of games where you by the time you finish the game, you've read like 2 or 3 books of text.
Pretty much.
Nowadays Fortnite you can play like 6 hours and not read a single word.
Exactly. Right. Right.
And so that's sort of like the shift in gaming, and just that comes with the graphics and the processing and the ability to actually like make like do cooler things in games. I thought that through game stories we could create an experience where there's a lot more reading that still maintains the characters, the gameplay, the story progression, etc. And so we designed an AI engine that integrated with the Unity game engine
Mhm.
and basically allowed kids to create different characters. And then we would turn those into these sort of like interactive graphic novels.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Um, Using AI. And, it was a very cool product. The issue was around that was sort of like traction. And then also the whole idea behind it was that we wanted to like skate where the puck was going to be in AI. And at the time, the AI tools just weren't as consistent. But it's really sort of showed that, AI is more than just a question generator. It can actually
Yeah.
be a character generator. And so we were using,
Right.
LLMs to basically assemble characters from pre-existing game assets and then taking the user on these sort of like magical stories where they create their own characters. But one thing that we noticed there is that we were trying to solve a problem of reading engagement, but actually the thing about reading engagement is that kids who are really interested in fantasy are typically already reading a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're either playing Magic the
Sure.
Gathering
Yeah.
or they're reading Harry Potter. And so we weren't really just like solving that problem there. And then also we just found that it was as a consumer facing solution, very difficult to grow without massive
Yeah.
amounts of ad spend or some sort of viral loop or the ability to go viral on TikTok, which we tried but couldn't necessarily like crack that code, which I know is a
Right.
common story for entrepreneurs.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we decided that, hey, we're going to basically narrow our focus down a little bit more, figure out who really needs like literacy solutions. And one of the biggest ones that we found is that if you look at the NAEP, which is the National Association for Educational Progress, you'll
Yeah.
see that the number one group that's really one dislikes reading and scores really low are boys, and then specifically Black and brown boys, boys of color.
Yeah.
And so another thing around that is that it's also in the range between fourth grade and eighth grade. And so fourth grade, you'll see a lot of these boys performing at a grade level and then drop off in between the fourth and the eighth grade. And as a middle school teacher, that's like the group of kids that I knew. And I thought to myself, like, what is one is an age appropriate sort of content? The problem with
Yeah.
building a literacy solution for students in the middle school age is that at that point, every kid is an individual
Yeah.
and who
It's
has their
shifting.
own interests.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can't necessarily just make a game or an app around, like reading about animals, because at that point in time, they sort of graduated from that sort of
Yeah.
simplistic idea.
Different interests.
With younger kids, you can just make a whole thing around animals and
Yeah.
they'll eat it
They're
up.
stoked. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're like, okay, so we're gonna have to build something really specific here. We're gonna have to pick a specific person, but it's gonna have to be something where we could create enough content around it
Mhm.
and something that's developmentally appropriate. So we actually chose sports. Sports gives you it's like it's narrow, but it's also wide. So you have
Mhm.
basketball, you have football, you have baseball. So you can appeal to different people from around the country at different sports, and then really sort of like focus on like hyper local coverage, which is something that we're working on developing now. And that's what we're working on now, and that's what we're hoping to become, the actually genuinely impactful solution We did our beta in baseball last spring. It got incredible reviews, and now we're back for football in the fall, and we're going to be starting our basketball support and coverage within the next couple weeks.
That is really cool. Yeah. Okay. We mentioned a lot there. That's fascinating. So I want to backtrack a little bit to what you said about all these different competitors, right? Like you noticed companies doing things. And so how did you narrow down? I know you identified the audience, right, and what the problem was. And is there anything else you want to say about how you narrowed down how you were going to stand out from these other companies that were doing similar things and just get right into the niche of what you're doing?
So the answer is like what you said, is about picking a niche and committing to a niche.
Yeah.
Uh, it can be very, it's sort of it's a pitfall, it's a trap to try to appeal to every single person.
Sure.
If you appeal to every single person, you're not really appealing to anybody. And so we looked around in the education technology space, specifically in the K-12 literacy space, and we looked for things that weren't necessarily being like supported. Where is something that has a lot of content or that has a lot of fans, people are interested in it,
Yeah.
that doesn't have any sort of dedicated solution yet. And so far, the only organizations that have really tried to move into sports are, Sports Illustrated Kids. But still at their core, Sports Illustrated Kids is a magazine and not an
Right.
platform.
Yeah.
And then you'll see there's a couple of other people, a couple of other individuals, there's a couple of, creators who are doing sort of like in classroom curriculum, but no organization has created an entire digital learning platform with
Right.
sports engagement tool. And so we
Right.
viewed that as an opportunity because one, why doesn't we have to ask ourselves why doesn't it exist, right? And then two,
Hmm.
if you built it, would they come? Oh, the success of video games like Madden and 2K and especially in that age group that we're targeting
Yeah.
means that like if we build it, hopefully they will come. At least if they're in a school building and their teachers say you have to pick.
Yeah.
And the next one is why hasn't anybody built it yet, right? And one of the things that we sort of stumbled upon is that maybe it was just too expensive before the discovery
Yeah.
of large language models.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
now with large language models, we're able to cover just right now we're able to cover basically the entire NFL with like a single podcast partner, myself, and then a designer who's working on images, much of which are AI generated. And
Yeah.
our text and our content is AI generated as well. And it is the difference between like this version of what we have and the version that we would have built in, let's say, 2023, right, when the LLMs were first coming out, is that
Yeah.
now the context windows are massive. So you can provide them with tons of context. And they're really good at anchoring themselves on some sort of, source material. And so that's either for
Right.
us, that's like a podcast transcript, or that's our pre-existing coverage that we can upload and give it even more context, or that's a box score,
Yeah.
a player storyline, a team storyline. And
Awesome.
so it's enabled us to really build like a sort of comprehensive coverage ecosystem that we're hoping to, right now we're building the ship as we fly it. So we're not able to make it as, prolific as we'd like to because we got to build the wings and the landing gear and all this type of stuff. But we hope to really do like prolific coverage of the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, all these sports provided at multiple different reading levels and include like reading comprehension, the typical reading supports that you will see in a literacy app, but totally dedicated to sports.
Incredible. And so this app covers several different learning directions, right? Like literacy, mathematics, like it helps kids go into all those different things, right?
Exactly. So right now we're
Awesome.
focused mainly on literacy,
Uh,
and we offer for a school you can just take our articles, you can gather data from them,
yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
Or you can run our version of fantasy football, which is a
Got it.
much more kid friendly version where kids can form leagues with their friends or form league in the classroom. The consumer can also do that, and they can use an app where their kid is earning rewards within their game for
Yeah.
every single thing that they read. Now, math we're still developing, and that's actually my former colleague that I mentioned who's working with me in biology. He's awesome. He's incredible. He's developing that right now, and we're hoping to have that live in the coming weeks. And then, in the future, we look at like what are the other solutions here, and how can you really support like literacy and math. One of the big things is that there's a lot of organizations out there that do uh, like real reading intervention materials. Right now, we are
Hmm.
just a literacy platform for reading, but we're not a fully paced reading intervention solution. And so we try
Right.
to imagine, what does a intensive reading intervention solution look like for a kid who just loves baseball, or just loves the
Yeah.
Yankees, or
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
loves
Yeah.
the Lakers? And how
Sure.
can we do something like that for them? Or whether it's maybe it's just like going through the entire history of the team, and while gradually building on the, phonetic skills and vocabulary and all the good things that you need to become a proficient reader.
Yeah. Brilliant. One of the things I saw on your website is the how much the kids enjoy just like picking their characters or things like that. And I wonder if you could dive a little bit deeper into how personalized this app becomes, or how you go about personalizing the experience for the student.
So for LitZone, it is personalized. Basically, right now it's really only personalized based off the individual's reading level.
Got it.
Now, the experience that we offer, since we're publishing so much content, they can just pick, read about the teams that they want to read about their favorite players that they want to read. And
Yeah.
so when we haven't deeply personalized it yet, other than the
Good.
difficulty level. But of course, part of that is also about the scale of producing a lot of the content that we have. Right now, we're producing at a smaller scale than we want to, like really when we're up and running. And at that point, what we're going to do is we're going to ask them about their favorite teams, their favorite players, and we're going to ensure
Yeah.
that we're feeding them content about that.
Amazing. Yeah. And then for the game stories, that's a much more personalized journey, right? Can you tell us more
Yeah.
about?
So in game
Yeah.
stories, students can actually create their entire character themselves.
Yeah.
They create the character, they create the background of the character, and then they watch the character come to life. You can see it's basically a graphic novel style where the character is on the left and another character is on the right, and they can actually play as them in a platformer game as well.
Wow. That's cool. That's definitely something I haven't heard of
Yeah.
before. That's incredible. So when you were doing these testing out these products, what were some of the things that you noticed the kids taking to the most? What did they enjoy the most?
So one of the biggest things that we notice is, for us, it was very clear, like in LitZone at least, what teams the kids were fans of. You could
Right.
tell immediately by what
Right.
is their most read articles, whether they're a Pirates fan, right, or they're a Bengals fan, or they're a Bills fan. That was something that we noticed immediately. Another thing that we noticed is that kids really do like the gamification aspect. Kids
Totally.
want to get rewarded, and they want to. You could say maybe that's like a good thing or a bad thing, and they want to get those rewards, like often and in large amounts. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at is how do you break up the reading so that the reward is coming, and so it is more like a game. Now, some people might say, hey, like that's like a bad way to gamify things. Like they're gonna lose stamina to like sit down and read. And my argument to that would be, you can't, if they leave the platform, they're not reading anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So, if their parent is at home, of course, there's wonderful parents out there who make sure that their children are reading every single day. But
Yeah.
a lot of the time, that's just not what happens. A lot of the time, parents think that a school is going to take care of everything, and it's a set it and forget it type of thing. Send the kid to school at 7 a.m. and bring them home at 3 p.m. and then tell them to do their homework, and it's done. But the reality is no, like kids need to actually be reading like 15 minutes every single day, ideally a half an hour every single day. We try to provide our content around that, and we also center our gamification and our rewards around like how much is like, let's say 10 minutes, right? So 10 minutes of reading, and you're going to unlock your first like gameplay reward, and then if you want to unlock your real like your gems to purchase things,
Yeah.
then you're going to have to really go to that 30 minutes. And
Mhm.
so that's how we've thought through it.
That's really cool. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the guests on this podcast were talking about different ways to engage like that intrinsic motivation, right? To get the kids really like, I want to compete with my friend, or I want to
Yep,
get that reward. I want to, it's like it becomes something that they're genuinely motivated to do. Whereas, like you said, otherwise, it's better to have this, because otherwise they just might not be
exactly.
practicing or reading. So I think another concern probably with some parents and educators is the amount of time that kids might spend on screens. What's cool here is that you're providing a really constructive screen experience. So I'm just curious, how has that gone over? You've seen a really positive reception with parents and teachers,
Yeah, so we've
this
seen,
technology? Mhm.
really great reception from parents and teachers, from both, really, just saying like, hey, like we really love this. Thank you for creating like a solution that speaks to kids. Because one thing that's like important to note is that sports the sports world in general has really moved away from like the family friendliness,
Yeah.
mainly
Yeah.
because of the influence of, like adult contests, adult games, right? Gambling. At this point, most of your beloved websites for sports, whether it's ESPN or Sports Illustrated or Bleacher Report, if they don't have their own, built-in betting application, they've certainly partnered with one, and that one is featured prominently. And
Yeah.
so the thought process behind that is like schools may not have necessarily caught on to this yet, but if you're a school, there's almost no way that you can allow ESPN to be accessible to your students on school devices if they're going to have if all they need is their parents' email address and password and then they can log on. And so we're thinking, like one of the things is like how do we create a place for kids to consume and follow the sports that they love in a world in an industry that's like truly moving away. And even then it's like I don't view that as like a bad thing on those
Right.
folks in the industry. You have to make money somehow. You have to
Hmm.
make money somehow. And making money in the media industry is notoriously difficult. Especially nowadays when so much of the media is, free and on Twitter and on Instagram. And so I don't blame them. I don't blame them, and I don't think it's that what they're doing is necessarily unethical, but it's certainly inappropriate for children. And so that's another opportunity that we see going in as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. No, it's absolutely it's super important to have an experience that the parents, the students, or the teachers they see as like a safe and constructive learning environment for the kids,
Mm,
and you know it's compliant and all that.
absolutely.
So I'm curious. You mentioned earlier some of the future things that are going on with your company, and I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you could describe like within the next 12 months, like in the next calendar year, what would be some of the big things you'd like to see this platform take on? Like, what would be a big win for you guys?
So one, we want to achieve our first major school district partner. That's something that we view as like necessary from a business perspective. Now, from a platform perspective, really want to massively increase our level of coverage.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've always imagined for LitZone is this hyper local, hyper personalized coverage for every single kid, regardless of where they live. We're
Yeah.
covering your team. If it's
Mhm.
baseball, we're covering your team. If it's basketball, we're covering your team. If it's football, we're covering your team. Different types of games. So like taking a little bit from like the game stories, uh, inspiration, a little bit of inspiration from there, and building out, these sort of word games, maybe card games, things like that for kids
Mm.
to play on our platform. Um, and overall, just becoming the go-to place for children to read and follow the sports that they love. That's
Yeah.
that's our goal in the next coming 12 months.
Amazing. Yeah. So just having it leveled up at that level, in that way of the kids are able to get that live, high quality,
Exactly.
and again, like that's the personalization too. Like it's really something that they feel, yeah,
Yeah.
follows what they care about. Awesome.
And then also I mentioned a little bit around the go ahead.
No, you first.
I mentioned a little bit around building a reading intervention solution, like a true reading intervention solution. That's something
Yeah.
that we're also like very interested in. I'm not sure if that's a 12-month thing.
Yeah.
That might be a little bit longer than 6 months because
Yeah.
that requires, testing and research and like proving efficacy really before you can call yourself that type of solution. But that's also something that we envision in the future as well.
Yeah, and so I'm curious about some of the challenges you've either run up against so far or that you foresee in the expansion of this project.
Yeah. So for challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges with any project is getting enough people on the platform and getting enough feedback from those people to build something that's truly great. It's like the number one challenge for almost every organization you're going to see is it's getting more users, getting more
Totally.
customers. That's one of our biggest challenges. Another one is around the balance between gamification and literacy. And then how do we, if we are doing gamification, if we view that as like a very strong tool, how do we directly tie that to like literacy outcomes? Because even now, one of the common things that you'll see the kids come on and just go straight to answering a quiz, right? We have a lot of students who read every single word, and then we have some students who just go boom to the quiz. Let me get my
Yeah,
points. Let's get it done. That's something
right.
that you can't really avoid.
Mhm.
And how do you maybe, make the text so that it's very short, have a quiz right there, and then deliver text quiz, text quiz, text quiz, making something that's a little bit more interactive, right? Or how do you ensure that what you're writing about is so fascinating to them that they're always going to want to sit down and read it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so those are the two things. And we think that it'll be a combination of the two. But that's certainly a challenge from that perspective. And then of course, just when I talk about scaling up and covering all these sports, that's certainly like a very Herculean effort. Uh, Mainly just because you can imagine all these sports basically overlap at one point in a year, and each one has 30 teams. And if it's like NBA and baseball season, you could have 30 games in like a day, you know.
Yeah, right,
And then that's a little bit rare, and that's only going to be like 2 or 3 weeks out of the year. But how do you manage that amount of content? How do you have quality control of that amount of content? And then how do you deliver that content to the user in a way that isn't
right.
overwhelming?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So just managing the high amount of information, improving the quality of the education for the kids, and then growing in a way where you can test it out and see what's really working well, what's really not, what's reaching the students, yeah,
And then what's
expansion.
effective.
What's
That's
effective,
that's
exactly.
and that's the most
Yeah,
important thing, because that's what schools care about. I mean, that's what I care about. I didn't start this because I love sports, because I want to write about sports. I do love sports, and I'm sure I'll happy to write about sports. But we're a social impact company,
yeah,
and our investors are social impact investors. People want to see social impact outcomes.
yeah.
They no nobody wants me to just go and start like a brain rot mobile games like dev shop, which is like, maybe you could do that, right? Or maybe we could go and find something that's easier to build, right? Something that's easier to find market traction. But
Mm.
for us and as an organization, it is about the efficacy. How do we, with our target kids, increase reading scores?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's what's so important about especially working in education is you really have that impact driven mission, and you really want to. The outcome is not how much money can we make; it's how much impact can we have on the students in a measurable way, and also how can we sustain that as a business, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
beautiful. If there was one of these challenges or problems that you could rapidly solve, like just which one would you choose?
I would choose efficacy
Okay.
for a few reasons, because one, that's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
How do we how do we make what we're building is effective? It leads to outcomes. Because when something is proven to be effective, not only does it achieve your social goal outcomes, but it makes marketing, finding users, finding schools that much easier. Because we have this peer reviewed white paper that we made with Columbia University or Johns Hopkins or NYU, and that can take you really far in conversations with school districts. Because right now, what we've identified is that we've identified that one, kids view sports as an idea, is like a very interesting thing to be able to read about while they're in their school building. So the interest is there, but how do we prove the efficacy? How do we ensure that it's not just click, click, click mindlessly? How do we ensure that it's
Exactly.
actually it's actually
Yeah.
having an impact?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Engagement, stuff like that. Yeah. And then I'm curious, I know you found seems like you found your target, but do you see this growing into other areas, say music or other kind of themes? Like, do you see this project expanding? And if so, what are you most
I could
interested
I
in?
could definitely see that. I mean, I think that expanding to other topics is a very fascinating thing for us, and we definitely try to, like when we try to do like cross-disciplinary coverage. So we do try to cover sports science. We do try to cover, like any sort of like,
Cool.
if there's a classroom friendly event that's
Exactly.
associated with sports, we'll try to cover that as well. But I think one of the things is that it can be really difficult to expand, let's say, like horizontally, right? I would,
Yeah.
as opposed
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
expanding into like different topics,
Right.
I would prefer to go down even lower and
Right.
stick with sports, and maybe make an early reader,
Mm-hmm.
something where it's a an idea that I've been throwing around in my head, teach your all-star to read, things like that, where maybe it's a 3-year-old, 4-year-old,
Yeah. Cool.
or maybe we move up and we go
Yeah.
into the high school level. There's a lot of high school students. Just now I was talking about the NAAP results, but they were talking about how over 30% of high school students can't even read at a basic 12th grade level, at a basic level by the time they graduate. And so I've spoken with a lot of literacy specialists. I've spoken with a lot of people across all different grade levels. And high school is actually, for me, I felt like middle school was an underserved place in literacy. high school even more so, because all the attention in high school goes to career preparation, to college preparation.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's kids who would struggle to spell a lot of the colleges that they're applying to.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. There's so much potential. And I agree with you. It's a lot of times better to just go deeper into what you've gotten good at and, find that expertise in all, like perhaps the different age groups, how does that
Yeah.
apply and improving the technology. So I think maybe a good way to tie up the conversation is if you were to talk to a business owner who's in a similar place to where you were and who's considering building or going forth with a technology like this, what maybe were some words of wisdom you might have?
My words of wisdom would be to really ground yourself in the user. What does the user want? What is their problem? And what do they have to say?
Yeah.
And then when you're testing your solution, get feedback, as much
Mhm.
feedback as possible,
Yeah.
because, it's so easy to, like, even with game stories, right? So for us, we still have it running and, we still have people logging on, but the reality is that we couldn't, retain users necessarily that well. And, it's a cool technology. It's a cool concept. I explained it to you. You said it sounds cool. User experience, UX, especially in education, is everything. And, unless you're building,
Yeah.
let's say, like a test prep tool where if they don't use your program in the next 3 months, they're going to fail the LSAT that's coming up, right? That's something that maybe you can, let the UX go to the side and just deliver the content.
Right.
But if you're building an education, if you're building K-12 education, UX matters a lot. And
Yeah.
then I would also say, just be careful about how you use your resources. You have limited resources. Odds are if you're building an education technology, you're not, a monstrously funded AI company where you
Right.
can buy a massive office and throw parties and do all these things. You're probably running on a lean and mean budget, a lean and mean team. And
Yeah.
so, be careful about how you spend money, and be careful about how you use, your own time and your own energy. And I guess the last thing would be to really, center it in the impact, center your work in the impact that you're making. People want to be part of a mission. They want to be part of something that's giving value to people or changing the world. Everybody.
Mhm.
They could be a random bookkeeper, a random salesperson, somebody who's not necessarily working for, maybe they're working in health insurance, but their passion is probably not health insurance. They didn't grow up saying, I want to be a health insurance salesperson, right?
Yeah.
But if you can take that person and make it, about a mission, right? And say, hey, we're going to be increasing income for people. We're going to be training people for jobs. We're going
Yeah.
to be we're going to be helping kids read.
Yeah.
Then suddenly you have people really want to get behind the mission, and
Totally.
that's a great way to activate it and create evangelists.
Amazing. Being really in touch with the people you're serving and also the people who are going to support that.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's really good. And that takes being, like you said, really grounded in the why of what you're doing and being really clear on it. Amazing. James, this was a very interesting conversation.
yeah.
You covered a lot of topics and had, I just really enjoyed the depth of experience you have in the school system and how that's
Thank you.
inspired this project. Yeah. Where can people support you and how can they?
Yeah, you can look for me on LinkedIn. It'll be James Kelly. That will be under my company, Learnyx. But if you're interested, if you have, a sports fan in your life, you have a teacher in your life who teaches young sports fans, you can head over to litzone.app. I have a contact button there, and you can create your team, create an account, and start reading.
Amazing. Thank you, James. We'll make sure to put that all in the show notes for the listeners too. And
Absolutely. Thank you.
yeah, thanks so much for joining us. This was great.
Yeah.
Cheers.